The never-ending story. Even the film's wildly ambitious intentions are embedded in the title. A story that never ends is our first hint that this won't be an ordinary kids movie. Bastian as a character is someone in a very intense crisis. His mother is dead, and he has dreams about her. His dreams seem to be his last remaining connection to his mother, so he's desperately clinging to them. His father is eager for him to move past her death and get on with life, but as we see later, life is too painful. Bastian is shy, reserved, and easily picked on by the more cruel characters of the real world. So, the comforting dream world of fiction is easy to get lost in. These dueling realities Bastian is wrestling with will become the heart of the movie's theme. Our next clue that this isn't an ordinary kids movie is the idea the bookstore clerk presents to Bastian, and it's likely a theory that's completely new to him, that the reality he's grown accustomed to is only one reality. The fictional books he reads are part of this reality in which stories are made up by an author, and untrue, there to be enjoyed and then forgotten about as he consumes the next book, always remaining in what he assumes to be the real and only world. The idea that one could actually move between our reality and the reality of a book, as if everything contained in the book were physically real, is something his young mind doesn't understand. But this is just the beginning. In fact, the movie is a great example of the perils of existing in a world that is often cruel and unforgiving. We will come to see examples of this later on. The rug really gets pulled out from under kids watching this movie when the rockbiter describes what happened to his land.
It just wasn't there anymore. Nothing was there anymore. Not even a dried up lake.
A hole?
A hole would be something. No, it was nothing.
This idea of nothing is an introduction to the film's main villain, a massive destructive force swallowing all of Fantasia. But what is nothing? To describe it would be to describe something, but that's the opposite of what nothing is. This kind of non-existence is a concept that could be challenging to grasp for any adult, let alone children. It was extremely unusual for this to be the central conceit of a mere kids movie, but it's an aspect that was perfectly in line with the idea of a storybook that actually existed in a separate reality. And at this point in the movie, Bastian is still just an ordinary boy, reading an ordinary book like he's done over 100 times. As the film introduces the hero of the story, it turns out to be a little boy. The idea that a child is the only one fit to fight such an existential threat is very interesting, and it puts forth the notion that children have an inherent strength by way of their strong imaginations, as imagination is what keeps Fantasia going. The film cleverly begins to build on the idea of this fictional dream world being closely linked and just as real as Bastian's reality. It first does this by having Bastian eat when Atreyu eats, and even conserve his food as a precaution against the long journey. Atreyu cries, Bastian cries. These seemingly innocuous details are important because it creates a deeper connection between Bastian and the world he's experiencing. But it also subtly cues the mind of the viewers, especially the child viewers, to become more psychologically involved with the movie they're experiencing. And as a result, the movie's themes become more powerful. This is also a key component that makes the death of Atreyu's horse all the more devastating. And the Swamps of Sadness begins setting clever parallels between the harsh realities of life in the events and places in the book, as if they are mirror reflections of one another. The idea that one sinks further into the swamp, the sadder they become, couldn't be a more perfect representation of depression. Even more solid links between Bastian and Fantasia begin to form when Bastian screams and Atreyu and Morla actually hear him. This is the first time the film is unambiguous about the ties Bastian has to Fantasia and vice versa. And the existentialism ramps up as Morla describes herself as we rather than I, and introduces the idea of nihilism. The nothing represents this nihilism, but its presence hasn't really been dwelled on enough at this point for it to matter. Morla's speech is a more fleshed out example of this concept.
We don't even care. whether or not we care.
Not caring about not caring goes even deeper into this complexity. For children, most of these ideas go in one ear and out the other, but luckily the movie does a great job of presenting these metaphors in other interesting ways. The first gate before the Southern Oracle presents yet another mature metaphor for the challenges of life. This gate cannot be passed through unless one has total confidence in themselves. An obstacle being overcome with a confident attitude is an idea any teacher or parent would be glad to instill in a child, and it's another parallel between the real world and the supposedly fictional Fantasia. Atreyu comes to the magic mirror gate, which looks deep into a person's soul and reveals their true selves, and it's Bastian that is reflected back at Atreyu. This is another not-so-subtle nod toward the idea of Bastian being one with Fantasia, as he is essentially the true self of its greatest warrior, and since he is experiencing the book through the eyes of Atreyu, this link becomes even stronger. Once Atreyu encounters Gamork, the film more fully explains the ideas behind the nothing, and it makes perfect sense. Hopes and dreams are the foundation of human existence. They allow us to imagine and build ourselves a better life. The nothing being the force that represents the erasure of these human traits is again a perfect metaphor. The nothing is basically nihilism, or the idea of there being no meaning in anything. Nihilism promotes apathy, and apathy erodes progress. These are heady, mature themes for a kids' movie. The final scenes complete the link between Bastian and Fantasia as he realizes the book is actually a separate reality that was just as whole and complete as his own reality, and that he had been a part of it the entire time. Not only that, it suggested that Bastian's reality has its own audience, which is us, the viewers of the movie. As if the film hadn't presented kids with enough complexity, it throws yet another curveball. And notice at this point, as Bastian experiences the story, he isn't even looking at the pages anymore. He's looking at the Empress. But for all intents and purposes, he's actually peering out into the audience, completing the previous idea of audiences watching audiences. These kinds of mind-bending ideas usually weren't part of your typical kids' movies. And when I first saw The Neverending Story as a child, I could feel there was something extremely unusual about what was happening, even though I didn't really understand it. And somehow, with all these trippy, complex ideas, the film never loses sight of telling a compelling, memorable story. If you enjoyed this video, consider hitting the like and subscribe button, as I'll be posting more content in the future. Thanks for watching.